Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to start our session talking about best practices to secure SMBs in an evolving cyber threat landscape. Our audience start to watching us from LinkedIn. We are also hosting on Twitter and YouTube channel. We will start in a second. Okay. So today we will cover two concepts of how to secure the SMPs in business, evolving and focusing on threats that targeting passwords. Today we will focus on security hardwares. The speakers will be me as Abdul Ghani Al Khatib and Mr. Rami from the kernel Dubai branch. We will talk and mention about Ubico products, multi-factor authentication, and how can we use it to enhance our security and business level to secure business in our domain. Let me introduce myself. This is Abdul Ghani Al Khatib, IT cloud engineer working in Cloud Zone. I'm cloud enthusiasm. I had many projects migrating business from local environment to use cloud solution. I'm already focusing how to secure and enhance security in companies. Evolving cyber threat and regularity landscape. We will learn more about how and the best practices to secure SMBs and evolving best products to secure identity. Small, medium size nowadays, partially working from homes, maybe out of the official office, that lead us to use our personal laptops, maybe use our personal networks nowadays just to finish our works due to the pandemic. FBI says that 300% of cybercrimes increases after and since the COVID-19 pandemic. So the attack vector is very increased due to working from the home remotely and many more. The remote and hybrid work risks divided by three categories. It may be targeted places. Remote work is connecting from maybe home networks, from cafes, from unsecured and not protected networks, just to connect to their emails, their system, their cloud-based system. Even people maybe accidentally open an attachment that contains a malware or virus that cause an encryption, maybe crypto, or deleting or even a breach of that company, or even technology. So how can you apply the security or incident response solutions on your home network or coffee network or whatever? So most people nowadays uses their mobile phones, their personal mobile phone, to access their production emails and maybe production system, just to monitor and maybe working a quick tasks remotely. We have breaches. We learn about past stories and how the breaches happen. So the SolarWinds, that we all know about it, that started by guessing a password. So the password is first vector that is targeted by hackers just to expose and breach your system and company. 80% of hacking related to breaches uses stolen credentials. So most of the attacks that happen nowadays is just stealing an old password. stolen password, or from previous breaches happen and exposed to the dark web. So if you're an SMB says, okay, am I targeted and why? We will know all the SMBs is they have very richful data and lucrative. Their entry point is very easy comparing to the enterprise level. They don't have very support team or security team just to monitor their resources 24 by 7. They don't have SOC. They don't have incident response solutions or a large enterprise level for security. They don't have enough investment in security because they are small and not afford that a huge of security plans on architecture. If you ask yourself, if you are from small companies, what is or when the last time you are attending an official cybersecurity training? So that lead us to make a vulnerability of inadequate staff and people of cybersecurity training. So you have already access to critical data like emails, production email, production accounts. That is, if somebody access to it, that will hurt your business and others enterprise as well. According to the report says, okay, so it's one of the 3 breaches coming or and involved the SMBs in that breaches. So if you are SMB, so most probably you are targeted not directly to breach your data, but to breach someone else bigger than you. But you are the key to attack the enterprise level. Okay, SMBs, they don't have an internal policy just to protect their passwords. They don't have maybe a very strong and secure manner and policies and procedures to save and protect their passwords. So most probably they write their passwords on down on papers, maybe on spreadsheets, maybe sharing their password over WhatsApp, personal messages, maybe printed out to the HR or non-technical people. So transferring password in insecure manner that lead us to store the password or somebody reuse it in a wrong manner. So a report says that from US National Cybersecurity Alliance says 60% of exposed and breaches company SMPs, most probably they are closing their business after that breach. So we have a business loss opportunity here, and it's not it's very a higher percentage just to lose your business that is impacted by a cyber crime. What the SMPs, what they need to look for, they need to secure their ways of business model, maybe using social networks or communication channels. Maybe they using their personal devices just to finish their tasks and work, but most probably they will use it in insecure manner. You have to ensure that to use a medium it's uninterrupted and communicating with your suppliers, partners, customers in a software that is in secure manner, like social networks, maybe email, that is totally secure to you as a person instead of just using a normal communication method. Most of business nowadays uses a cloud-based system like a CRM, maybe SAP, maybe not online email instead of exchange. So business nowadays focuses to use a cloud-based application. Cyber risk on that domain become higher because the threat is not only local, it's exposed over internet. So if you are using Salesforce, maybe CRM, maybe SAP on cloud based, so you are targeted to lead and make a breach across all your company and partners. So What is the scenarios that could be uses of the SMBs? You could work in remote or hybrid worker with your team. You could use your mobile. You could have a privileged user. You are maybe working behind supply chain company. You have shared workstation like using a shared application, shared accounts, and so. And most of them are nowadays here in Saudi Arabia. We can back to work in offices. So, what is the challenges for the SMPs just work and apply the security methods to secure their business? Most probably, they feel complicated when they apply multi-factor authentication or uh, strong solutions just to enhance the identity protection. Not sure the right approach that will keep the business protected. So whether to apply or purchase antiviruses or maybe application that uses multi-factor authentication, there is no clear method to apply for the SMBs just to enhance the security in their business. Most probably, they don't have enough IT support that keep watching on their system uh, in the business hours or out of the business hour. So for that points, we need some method that is competitive prices and lead us to protect our identity and account takeover. As all you know about the CIA, it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So authentication mechanism divided into three parts: what you know, like a password; what you have; and what you are. What you know, like a PIN or password; and what you have, like OTP and smart card and security. And who you are and what is the most stronger is like fingerprint or face or voice. It's like uh, biometric information about your body and identity as well. So that lead us to another thing. Not all the authentication method are equal. So username password is targeted by attack, and that percentage is 80% to attack, or it's to expose, to break. But moving out to the basic 2FA like SMS or mobile or email, that the attack penetration rate is from 10% to 50. So it's a little bit stronger. But what is makes that most secure is to use a hardware security key. And that lead us to zero attack penetration rate. So you know that there is a matrix between security and ease of use. So the easiest way to authenticate is just a simple username and password. But the hardest way is just to use multi-factor authentication and security hardwares and so on. We will know more about what is the application to secure our business through the Ubico products. So here's the example. Normal MFA is not strong enough to apply to your accounts. Here's the victim trying to log in to the fake login page. It's not real. The third attacker will start to stole or steal the credentials from the fake login page, then post it behalf of the real victim to the client web portal. The fifth, client web portal or official website will send back an OTP to the victim email or mobile number, and so victim again will insert that OTP to the fake login page, and that will make a fake successful login. At the end, attacker could have a valid authenticated session with MFA or multi-factor authentication enabled to access to the right system. Here's the percentage again. What is the most secure manner to secure your account and prevent and stop account takeovers? 50% by using phone number, 24% by SMS code, secondary email by 21, on device application OTP is 10%, and 0 by security and hardware key. This is the measures and factors that could enhance the security over the privacy and portability, reliability, and affordability. To use Ubico key instead of traditional multi-factor authentication methods. We all know that Twitter has a breach in 2020, 2020, and their investigation report says, okay, we will need to start the multi-factor authentication is more secure than only an OTP via SMS or an application. So the investigation says that the MFA via email or mobile is not enough to secure the account. How to get started? We will start with Mr. Rami Kiyali. He's a CTO of the kernel and Chief Technology Officer, Regional Director of the kernel Dubai, specialized in building authentication solution over years. He had works as a consultant alongside various governmental and private sectors. He worked with larger scale enterprises across the Middle East and Africa. Rami has also had a number of his personal works published and accredited by a number of most well respected firms in our industry. Okay, moving out to Mr. Rami.
Hello, everyone. Um, just first, I want to check that everyone can hear me and if you can see the presentation that I've shared. Right. Okay. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Abdullani, for this overview of the problem space. You're absolutely right. Today, phishing is probably the biggest problem and the biggest threat in terms of data breaches and account compromises. Um, I'm going to keep this short. I'm going to give you an overview of what Ubico's product is and why it's valuable, why it's important, and where it fits in. Um, I'll explain to you exactly where the problem is, and we'll take it from there to a Q&A. So to start with, YubiKey is a hardware token, is a USB device manufactured by by Ubico. Ubico is a global authentication leader. It's not new. It's the company is 14 years old now. It's backed by multiple VCs. It has some of the biggest names across the world as clients. The names that you will recognize on Ubico's website are mainly American and a few European companies, just because the customers and the type of organizations in our region, in the Middle East or in Saudi Arabia that use YubiKey don't normally like to um, talk about it or publish that information. So we're not always allowed to use a logo. But as you can see from the main heavy hitters, you have Google, Facebook, PayPal, Dropbox, and a few others. Gov.uk, which is the UK online government portal and online government services, also uses YubiKey, Ubico. Now, Ubico is a Swedish company, a Swedish American company. They have two main offices, one in Sweden and one in America, and the product is manufactured in one of those two regions. So the supply chain is particularly secure with Ubico. Why did it start? Security breaches have been a problem. This is a statistic from 2017. Security breaches have been an ongoing problem for a while now. Now in 2022, and after COVID, it's gotten even worse. Um, the scary thing is, 81% of breaches it comes from stolen passwords, and they also come a big chunk of them is not particularly from a stolen password, but sometimes from a weak password. And passwords are what we consider passwords our enemy, because passwords are um, easy to steal. They're transferred over the network. They're easy to guess. They're really difficult to manage for users, because the recommendation is for people to have a separate password for each individual service or website. But no one really does that. Very few people, unless they use a password manager, which again introduces other complexities. So the password in itself is a problem, and the vast majority of breaches happen because of credential management. So bad authentication, weak authentication, stolen passwords, data breaches, and so on. Um, the easiest way to steal a password is by phishing. And what phishing is, I'm sure you already know. Normally starts with either a link to like a WhatsApp group or an SMS, or much more commonly via email. And for a phishing attack to for a phishing attack to succeed, it doesn't really need to succeed for every single employee in the organization. It just needs to work. It just needs to work for one or two critical ones. Normally, it starts with tricking the user. So historically, phishing attacks were not able to handle one-time passwords and two-factor authentication. However, recent phishing attacks are able to steal the password first, and then whatever OTP or whatever second factor the user uses. Typically, it's an OTP, a one-time password. So phishing is pretty much the easiest way to steal somebody's password, because um, more and more users are getting fatigued with getting emails. They're not vetting the links that they check enough. Um, it's an arms race between the spam filter and the backend and the phishing attacker and how they design the web pages. It's super painful. So um, Fishers also don't just target admins. As a matter of fact, targeting admins like IT admins or security admins is probably the more difficult route for a fisher to succeed. It's much easier to compromise a standard employee or regular employees who isn't an admin. It's easier to compromise their account and then move laterally from there to another account, or something within the same vicinity. Um, and I don't really need to compromise every single account if I have one compromised account that lives inside the organization's network. Um, there's another problem, and that's what I said, that most 2FA solutions are vulnerable to phishing. They're really, really hard to protect. It's really, really hard to protect because it's something that the user enters. It's something that the person types on a keyboard. And normally, anything that can be typed on a keyboard, anything that the user enters or types, can be stolen at some point. So OTP, one-time password, a phishing attack can ask for it. Mobile applications or mobile push can be intercepted with man in the middle, or there are ways around it. SMS is even easier. It's you could either ask the user to type an OTP via SMS, or you can even get a copy of the text message itself without having to wait for the user. Again, there are ways around it. If you guys read about the SS7 vulnerability, you'll see exactly what I mean. SMS, by the way, is not recommended at all. It hasn't been recommended for a while. It's today it's probably the most vulnerable second factor authentication method compared to everything else. Now, here's a regular workflow for a phishing attack. A phisher sends an email that says that scares the user somehow. For example, they pretend to be the bank and they say, "Oh, we noticed some suspicious transactions, or we noticed some suspicious activity. Please click here to log in." Or they pretend to be the person's organization or employer, and they would say, "We noticed somebody tried to log into your account. We just need to check that it's you. Please click here to verify." Or any of those similar formats. And normally, when a user is in a rush or is not familiar with how the link works, they would click on the link, go to a page that looks exactly like what they would expect from their bank or from their organization. They would type in their username and password, and the phisher would steal that. And then immediately, the phishing page would ask for an OTP or for a push notification. And then the phisher would steal that, assuming the user actually types it, and then you'd be able to take over an account. So that's the general formula. Some software is more resilient than others, but that's the general formula. Now, um, this whole thing starts because of the use of passwords. So as you can see, even an OTP has the password word in it. It's a one-time password, and our problem isn't the one-time part. Our problem is the password part. The password, anything that the user enters, is vulnerable. So what Ubico does is they manufacture a USB key. And that USB key, instead of using a password, it uses something called public key cryptography. So it uses a public and a private key to authenticate. Now, I'm not going to dive into PKIs and public key cryptography and how this whole thing works. I can just tell you, like, imagine this YubiKey as a sort of a stamp or something similar. The idea is the YubiKey contains some piece of information that never travels on the network, that the user never enters anywhere. It always stays inside the YubiKey, and it never leaves, and it cannot be extracted or backed up or copied or anything. And that piece of secret information that is stored on the YubiKey is used to provide proof that this is a YubiKey that is associated with my account. That's the main idea. And by the way, all the secrets inside the YubiKey are stored in are stored in a secure way, the same way that your Touch ID or Face ID on an iPhone is stored. Okay. Um, when you're using public key cryptography, there's no secret stored on the server. So typically, when you're using a username and password, you keep the password in your head, and the server has to also keep the password, even if it's in an encrypted form. They still have to keep the password because the server needs to compare the password that you enter to the password that they have. And that's how it's typically stolen. So when an authentication server stores the password and encrypts them, well, an attacker or a data breach doesn't even need to decrypt the password. I might be able to reuse the exact same encrypted version of this password to authenticate into that server. So that's the scary part, the fact that the server stores something about the user, and that something has the potential to be compromised. Whereas when we're talking about public key cryptography, the private key is something that never leaves the user. It never leaves the YubiKey. It never leaves the user. It's only used to sign a message that proves that I definitely own this private key. I have access to this private key. And in this case, The server only stores the public part of the key, which is the small fraction that identifies me. And when you steal that, so a stolen public key is completely useless to an attacker because, well, for them to use this public key, they must have possession of the private key. And the private key never leaves, you cannot export it from a YubiKey. It never leaves a YubiKey. So when I'm using a YubiKey, there's nothing that they could steal. The part that is used for authentication never travels on the network, is never typed anywhere on a keyboard or by the user, and it uses public private key cryptography, which is far more secure than even the longest password. And I say that because typical passwords range from, 12, 14, 20 characters, 24 characters maybe, whereas a typical private key is about 2 megabits, which is much larger than your typical password and much more difficult to guess or even brute force. Um, the reason YubiKeys eliminate account takeover is because it's a dedicated hardware. So it looks like this. It's a simple USB stick that has some special sauce inside it, special chips inside it that store these private keys, and they never leave here. They're generated inside the YubiKey. How is this different? YubiKey in general is faster. It's much more reliable. It's compatible out of the box right now with every single major browser. So it works on Safari, Firefox, Brave, Opera, Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, and a whole lot of others. And it also works out of the box with many services such as Google, Facebook, Dropbox, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP. So it works even with consumer and with enterprise solutions. Um, Ubico has been used by Google internally, and it was made mandatory. So Google themselves create a product called Google Authenticator, and Google Authenticator is a good product as an OTP generator. However, Google released a public white paper about how they switched from using OTPs to using hardware tokens for authentication and completely eliminated account takeovers because, well, obviously, when you have a YubiKey, a remote attacker cannot steal it from you unless they physically have it. The other bonus, and this is just a side effect of the design of YubiKey, is that it's much faster to log in. So I personally use a YubiKey to log into my computer and my most important websites or wherever I can really register a YubiKey. Uh, I would register it. I can log in faster than somebody else who is trying to enter an OTP. Because think about it, all I need to do is type my password. If I'm using a password and the YubiKey, all I need to do is type my password, touch my YubiKey. Whereas somebody else has to, let's say, using an OTP, they have to either wait for an SMS, which typically comes in a second, but sometimes can take longer, or I have to find my OTP app on my mobile and look up the 6 digits and enter the 6 digits before that timer runs out. That's the general interaction. So YubiKey is actually considerably faster than any other methods, and it works on desktop and laptop, Android and iOS. So you could use it via NFC on both mobile platforms, and you could use it via USB on your desktops and laptops. YubiKey reduces support costs. I'm not really going to cover the the support part of it, but mainly it reduces support costs because it reduces account takeover. It pretty much eliminates phishing, and password resets are actually quite costly. Now it doesn't seem that way for organizations under 1,000 users, let's say, but one of the most time-consuming IT admin activities are password resets. And if you calculate the total productivity lost on password resets, you could see how you could, using a hardware token that eliminates password resets and forgotten passwords, um, it makes it much easier for users to never have to resort to contacting an IT admin, which in turn reduces costs for larger organizations. Um, this is the Google white paper. Happy to link it at the end of the webinar. But this shows you how using a YubiKey reduce their support costs and their support incidents per user per month. And this is Ubico's compatibility. There's many more softwares and applications that YubiKey supports, and they're available on Ubico's website, which is www.ubico.com. You can view it there, but you can see that YubiKey, um, you can see that YubiKey works with pretty much anything, and it doesn't care what segment of technology you're using. So you could use it to log into your computer, Windows, Mac, or Linux. You could use it for remote access and VPN, which is suitable for a whole lot of organizations. You use it for identity management and single sign-on. You could use it for password management. So I personally use one password, which now supports YubiKey, but other password managers also support YubiKey. You could use it for privileged access management, a whole lot of online services. Fastmail and Dropbox are one of the early adopters. Amazon and AWS support YubiKey. It's used with developer tools, so you could use it to log into GitLab, GitHub, and Bitbucket. But you could also use it to sign applications. So when you create new applications and that require signing, you can you can sign these applications with a key that is stored inside a YubiKey, which is a bit more secure than storing the same key on your file system. It also supports PGP. So for those of you familiar with PGP, you'd like how easy it is to use. For those of you who are not familiar with PGP, happy to send you a few links. We can set up a separate discussion or a Q&A to discuss what this is. But I can tell you that this is a bit more niche, a bit more specialized way of encrypting and signing emails and documents. Um, YubiKey, like I said, is trusted by many of the largest organizations in the world, and these are just some of the names. We have millions of users. Ubico is won a bunch of awards, and you can find all of the information on Ubico's website. Now, this is YubiKey's lineup, and there's basically two variations. There's a blue key, which is called YubiKey Security Key, and there are the black keys. The black keys are YubiKey 5 series. All the black keys, all the YubiKey 5 series keys are identical. They work exactly the same way. They contain exactly the same features. The one difference is that one uh, of the full-sized keys support NFC. Uh, but that's it. That's the only difference between one particular key, which is called the YubiKey 5 NFC, and everything else. And as you can see, it comes in two sizes as well. So it comes in full size, which is the second and third keys from the left, and it comes in nano size, which are the last three keys in that list. Um, having a lineup simplified like this really helps with selection. We don't really have to go through explaining what features that each key supports because, well, YubiKey 5, which is the black key, supports everything, and YubiKey Security Key, which is the blue key, only supports FIDO-U2F and FIDO2. Now, Ubico advertises it as waterproof and crush resistant. And I'll be honest with you, when we first started working with Ubico, I didn't really believe that claim because a lot of companies claim that. I changed my mind after accidentally forgetting my YubiKey in my pants pocket, in my jeans pocket, and threw it in the wash. And it came out a little bit scratched, plugged it in the computer, it still works. So I know I know that it can survive really, really harsh environments, including, you know, washing detergent. There's many case studies that we could go through, and the most commonly referred to one is the Google case study. The Google case study is referred to because it's specifically, so Google was using 2FA before they switched to YubiKey. Their 2FA was based on OTP, and they had multiple problems to solve. One was only one of them was account takeover, but they had support issues, they had passwords reset issues, they had successful account breaches, and that's scary. So that case study is public, available on both on Google's and on Ubico's website. Um, you could read more on different podcasts. You could read about the Facebook case study. Facebook case study was also quite interesting, but it was basically a similar scenario to Google, because that's again, phishing is the most common way of attacking. Uh, Ubico also publishes webinars on Bright Talk, and these are specific. You could see them occasionally, but there exist they are pre-recorded. Some of these webinars are already pre-recorded, so you're able to have a look at them and explore more topics. Now, before before I move on, we'll see if we have a time for a quick demo. But if we don't, I would want to open it up for questions if you have any before we move on.
The webinar is have a delay between the actual stream and the LinkedIn platform. So we will make the Q&A is open for anybody just to drop that message over the webinar and contact them back by email or chat.
Okay. Okay, so I'm not particularly sure I understand. So there's a delay between this stream and a
Yes,
LinkedIn stream.
actually, yes. The delay between the actual and the other platform. So if you would like, we can make a close-on slot.
Okay.
If you have any ideas that just you need to present.
I just saw a question in the comments asking, what if I lost a YubiKey? And that's a question that I'd like to answer, because it's probably the most common questions asked. What if I lost a YubiKey? Now, there are two scenarios. If you lose a YubiKey as an individual and it is the only YubiKey associated with your account, then well, there's not much you can do. The YubiKey is supposed to protect your account. It's supposed to lock your account. If you don't have access to your YubiKey, you're not supposed to be able to log into your account, which is why we recommend individuals, uh, people who use YubiKey for their personal accounts, is to have or own at least two YubiKeys and associate them with the same account, which is possible with every major service. In an organization, though, there isn't that big of a problem. So if you lose a YubiKey, it's as easy as resetting your password. You could um, you could contact your IT admin, and they could issue you a brand new YubiKey that works with your existing setup. So losing a YubiKey in an enterprise environment is far less scary. Only the IT admin really needs to talk about it. Um, Another question I'm seeing is how can companies reuse their old employees' YubiKeys? And that's a good question. Well, YubiKey is actually protected with a PIN number, and if you so for anyone, let's say you find the YubiKey lost in the street and you want to use it or unlock it, you have to know the PIN number that unlocks that particular YubiKey. So if you don't know the PIN number, you won't be able to use it. Now you can try to guess that PIN number, but YubiKey automatically locks itself after 3 failed attempts. So let's say someone finds this YubiKey on the street, they plug it into their computer, they type the PIN number 1 time, second time, third time, and now the key is locked, and it would reset itself and delete all the data, all the existing data from the YubiKey, and you have to re-enroll it. Now, companies can reuse their old employees' keys simply by resetting them. When you reset the key, it acts as if it's brand new and it's fresh, and you could reuse it for any new employees. Um, Another question I see is, do I need to renew my YubiKey after a while, um, like in case some keys expire? It really depends. If you're using YubiKey as a FIDO2 token, then no, there isn't anything that you need to renew because it's not issuing a certificate or a private key that expires. So you don't really need to renew it. If you're using it as a smart card, though, which is one of the modes available inside YubiKey, then you might have to. But that's a specific scenario that's normally automated um, that's normally automated by some management tool for organizations. Um, how do I see another question. I'm just not quite sure I understand it. How do I pay YubiKeys? W- what do you mean? How do I pay YubiKeys? Oh, I see. Um, well, if you want to purchase a YubiKey, contact our partners. We're Ubico's distributor, and we'll happily guide you to the right partner or to the right entity. CloudZone, for example, is a partner who's able to deliver YubiKeys if you want to purchase them. So for smaller retail, it may be possible to buy online. For larger orders, you need to place an order with one of our local partners. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Can we replace a password manager by YubiKey? Well, yes and no. Yes, you can because yes, you can for services that support YubiKey. So, for example, my personal Google account, my personal Gmail account, um, still has a password because Google asks for it, and because it has a password, like Google has not implemented completely passwordless authentication, which means it asks me for a password and for my YubiKey, and if it asks me for a password, it means I need to store that password somewhere because I don't like to generate passwords in my head. I prefer to generate them in a password manager and store them in the password manager because they're too complicated for me to remember. So when services are still asking for passwords, we cannot really eliminate a password manager. However, what we can do is we can protect a password manager with a YubiKey, which means that now you have a double secure vault. You would have a password manager that stores your passwords, but to unlock these passwords, you would require a YubiKey, which is why it's when you ask me, can it replace a password manager, I would say yes and no. Well, typically, it depends. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. Please feel free to shoot any questions to us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rami, for sharing us the detailed scenarios and information about YubiKey. We are happy just to having you today, and we will absolutely share this webinar across our social networks. So who could miss that webinar, he can watch it later. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day ahead.